All right. Okay. Hopefully I can hear myself. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And blast off. Welcome to the 82nd episode of the Korea podcast. I'm your host, Jack. Located here in South Korea, Ulsan, the beautiful city of Ulsan, South Korea. The Live in Korea podcast is a podcast about anything and everything to do with living and working in South Korea. In the past, we've been focusing heavily on the starting and running of operating of hagwon businesses, as well as gombubangs, and more recently, we've been focusing just on life in general in South Korea, doing interviews and so on and so forth. And today, I've got the pleasure of sitting down with Alex Sigrist. Am I pronouncing it right?
That is pretty darn close. Most people can't get that right.
All right. Sorry, one. And so, as we usually do it, today I would like to get some opinions from Alex. So we're going to talk to Alex about his life and what he does in South Korea as an expat. And of course, we're going to talk about Sam Okyere. I don't know, I've heard Koreans pronounce Okyere. I've always pronounced it with a K rather than a chi. And I guess that may have something to do with Congolization of his written name, right, in English?
It very well could be. I say Okyere just because I think I heard it from a Korean first, to be honest, and that's
Right.
probably why.
So I don't actually know what the proper pronunciation is of his last name. But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about.
No one's corrected me on Okyere, so I keep saying that too.
Yeah, I assume that well, I don't know. Yeah, let's just go with that. It could be, a Guyanese version of the English, or the English version of the Guyanese last name, or something like that. So, yeah. And let me just turn down the music here and check. Actually, I gotta just check quickly to make sure that there is no. I've been having some issues with like background sounds and all kinds of weird stuff during the last couple of episodes, which just basically gave a lot of the hecklers, a really good outlet for.
Oh, they're lovely.
For coming on and trolling away. I've been having some issues with like background sounds and all. Sounds good. No feedback, so that's good. All right, Alex. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks for agreeing to join.
Thank you for having me. This is fantastic. I feel honored that you considered me for this. I'm very sorry to all the people watching who were hoping for Sam, and they got me instead.
Yeah. That was my fumbling the initial introduction on the group. But so the reason why I contacted you basically is because I saw a couple of your YouTube videos that were posted on your channel, as well as you've made another video with another YouTuber. Yeah, I believe he's Asian black origin, right? I forget his name, his YouTuber name.
Could have been Cedric then, maybe.
Cedric,
a while
right?
Back. Yeah.
Cedric, yes. I think Cedric has been invited into one of the groups that I admin on Traveling Korea. I don't know if he's in there or not, but he may have made an appearance. I never talked to the guy, but so anyway, I saw you on one of the videos, watched some of your videos, and it seemed like you had a pretty strong opinion and a pretty strong stance. You met Sam Okyere yourself, and you had some points on that topic, so that's why I contacted you, because I thought, you kind of work in a similar circles, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe before we get into that, there is a synopsis, just a brief bio of you underneath the video, and it says you've been here for 11 years. So maybe, can you give us a rundown of like when you arrived, what you did since, and just what you do in general in Korea before we get into Sam and the topic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll have a question for you after I do that related to it. But I came to Korea about for the first time with my college professor, maybe 2008, and I came here to live right after that from 2009. So straight through that, I've been here in Seoul, just kind of enjoying what I was doing. I was planning on going back after a year, and I really enjoyed teaching at a middle school. And after 3 years of that, I decided I wanted to stay in Korea, but I didn't want to be continuing down the SMOE path, which I guess now it's EPIC, maybe. But so I decided to go get my master's degree at Seoul National University. And while I was there, I met someone who introduced me to someone in radio. And from that point on, I've just been doing more and more like radio, some TV work, and YouTube work, just trying to, I guess, make a living out of that because I really enjoyed talking about, of course, culture and traveling. I usually don't do as much hard-hitting stuff on radio, so I guess that makes YouTube my outlet for that. And so I've been here for 11 years. I really enjoy it. I don't plan on going back anytime soon. And I have a question. I noticed in your little bio, franchising director for Shane English Korea. This is kind of a long shot, but it's not Shane from Canadian Connection, is it?
I don't think so.
Because the guy that got me my first job in Korea was Canadian, and his name was Shane, and I haven't met many, so I was just wondering about that.
Oh, no. So Shane is it's an international brand. It's
okay.
British based, and the owner is located in Taiwan. He's an old man, like in his 80s now.
That's not him.
No, not different person. No. We dragged this sucker all the way from across the Atlantic or Pacific, whichever ocean is on which side. So yeah, no.
Yeah.
No.
Well, yeah, that's my basic background. I don't, like you mentioned earlier, my connection to this whole case is that I talk about it on YouTube, and I've met Sam myself, and that's, I don't want to give myself too much more credit because I think that's about where it stops.
Right. So you mentioned you basically met somebody who was in radio. How did you get your feet wet in that? How did you get your start?
Oh, man. I started... Basically, I had a YouTube channel first, and I made a video on the buldak bokkeummyeon, the spicy fire noodle challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really just doing it to make fun of the challenge because I was like, I can do this. Anyone can do this. Why is everyone obsessed with this? This is stupid. So I just added everything into it.
Right.
And somehow it went viral because that was just like every other video that was about that. They all went viral at the time.
Mm.
And while I was on a picnic, it was what they say about connections is true. I was on a picnic with some fellow students from Seoul National University, and it was his fiance at the time who had a friend from Jeonju who happened to come out to the picnic, and she happened to be working at a sosoksa, an agency, and was like, "Oh, you do YouTube? That's great. You can come work for our agency, and there's an opening right now at Arirang Radio that I could help hook you up with." Mm. And that's how it started. And then through that, I got a job at TBS because I now had something on my resume, and it kind of just builds from that in radio. That's how you kind of make it here. It's basically you get one job, and if you do decently well at it, through connections, through writers, you get 2 jobs the next season. And then maybe by the 4th season, you have 3 or 4 guest appearances at different stations. And it's kind of just been building since then. Mm. And so radio is where I got my start. You have to be in the right place at the right time, but it was certainly a lucky connection, and I don't take that for granted.
Right. Yeah. I think you also need to be located in a proper place.
Soul helps, yes.
Yeah. I had my brush with fame in, when was it, 2007, I think. I had an appearance on a big war movie, My Way.
Mm.
So the casting director was a fellow Canadian expat, went back to Canada, but prior to departure, he asked me if I'd be interested in participating in, the live show that they do, where the camera crew comes in and films your entire life for like a whole week.
My neighbor Charles, yeah.
Yeah, he asked me if I would be interested in that, and of course I would have been. But unfortunately, they were looking for somebody who was located, regionally somewhere up in Seoul, and we're way down south. So, yeah, I was like, damn, okay,
right. But yeah, no, and in fact, the guy that got me my second job, interesting enough, was from Ulsan.
No, really.
And I went and visited Ulsan because of him. We just did a trip one day and we went down there. So that is the one time I got to go to Ulsan. It was really nice. It's a great place. And
That's interesting how people say that. I just don't see it. Maybe I've been here for too long.
Yeah, no, it's a great place to visit. I don't
Yeah.
know. I think it's amazing that so many foreigners don't go there to visit because it is a really cool hidden spot. But I can see how if you live there, it's not like it's not the flashy lights of Seoul and it's not the beach of Busan. And so, but to visit, it was really nice.
Right.
Yeah, I was only there for 2 days or 3 days, so it was a good amount of time.
Sorry, I'm fiddling around with. I've got this set up. Our Hagwon, I don't know. We've got like a shortage of electricity apparently, and when electricity goes, our internet goes, and so I couldn't do the podcast from the Hagwon today. So I had to come home, and the lighting is all wrong because I'm not 100 professional, as somebody pointed out in the past. And so I've got this little piece of paper over my camera covering the light that's blowing in my face.
I mean, professional. I left my alcohol in the background, so yeah. you be the judge of what's professional.
JY Choi. Hi, Alex says. He says hello from the Wilson Choi family. So
JY. Oh, that's yeah. She and I'm assuming her boyfriend better be watching because if Mark's not watching, I'll be angry. But yeah, hello and glad you joined us.
So let's hop into, I guess we can intertwine it. I'm sure I'm going to come up with questions for you, personal questions on like, where you're planning on seeing yourself going with your career here and stuff. Mm-hmm. But maybe talking about Sam, when I caught, honestly, like, I don't know, I'm not a very big celebrity gossip consumer, not a consumer, a big consumer of celebrity gossip. So whenever something comes my way, it literally, like, I'll see it on because I use Twitter, I use Instagram. I don't really tweet so much, but I do, blink at it every now and then. And so just my feeds get flooded with all the info. And I saw stuff about Sam. Maybe I'm just the one who's slow on the trigger, but it didn't really register until a few days later. Can you give us just a little rundown of, like, for the viewers who are here, for those who may not have heard of it, who are not located in South Korea or maybe are in South Korea? I know there's plenty of people who are not really clear on what transpired, what happened in the context. So you seem to have a pretty good grasp of it from what I understood from your video. So can you give us a little rundown of, like, what happened?
Sure thing. So the story starts with high school in Uijeongbu, which is to the northeast of Seoul. And every year the students will do a picture, a senior picture for the graduation for memes that are popular, famous people, whatever's big. And some students did one of the Ghana pallbearers, and they're the ones that are dancing. You see them dancing. People put in memes of them dancing to electronic music. But basically, it's just a way. It's a company out there that does funerals for people, and it gives a little bit of life to the funerals. It's almost a celebration of it. And they did it, and the problem was they painted their face brown. They used it to become black, in other words, and that's called blackface. So Sam, who's been in the industry for a while and has seen it come up, year in and year out when it goes on like a Korean TV show, a comedy show usually is where it comes up. He basically wrote an Instagram post that said he's disappointed because he's tried to teach people about this in the past, and it seems like it hasn't been – people haven't learned it yet, and they're still doing it. And he mentioned things like there's a problem with the education system, and there's a couple of things we can talk about later that people criticized him for. But basically he called it out, and there was a backlash for a lot of different reasons, including – him not covering the faces of the kids because they were not 18 or at least they were still in high school. He used a hashtag called TK-pop, which I don't really even know what it means. Maybe it's spelled the TK-pop, but it was one that was considered unrelated to the incident. And the way that he worded it sounded insulting to some Koreans. And so he deleted the post, wrote an apology, and then after that, he subsequently deleted his Instagram account, or at least put it on private. And then there was a call for him to get kicked off the shows because of the backlash of what he did, of what they said he did. And so he's currently off air on the main show he was on, which was Daehan Waegugin, and it just means, I think it means like Korean foreigner in English. It's just a TV show that it's the foreigner TV show right now that has a lot of foreigners on it. Right. Not as popular as the previous one, but still, I'm sure that was a big chunk of his paycheck. And that's kind of the general gist of it all, of what happened. The other part, of course, is there was a backlash of foreigners who were saying, or were mad basically at the response of certain Koreans who decided to, in their, I guess in mine too, but in our opinion, ignore the blackface thing and just focus on what Sam did wrong and just make sure he got canceled. Right. So that's what you probably saw, was the uprising on social media, the people that would hashtag #IStandWithSam, and just kind of a lot of the frustration, especially of the black community in Korea. And it kind of boiled over, but in the end, Sam is off the show, and it's kind of fizzled out since then.
Right. So I think the first thing I saw, or the first thing that maybe really stood out for me, was here, let me just bring it up here quickly. Was this little gem here, I guess, and it's a picture of Sam with a girl in the red dress, and I saw somewhere a heading saying Sam Okyere and the red dress stir up controversy or whatever. And I guess the line something was, somebody made a comment about the girl, and then the comment was, once you go black, you never go back. I don't know who made that comment. Oh, okay, somebody else made that comment, and the comment below, posted by Sam, says preach. And apparently he was getting into really hot water because of that he was kind of, egging on this comment. But the interesting thing is, I talked to my wife, my wife's Korean, and I mentioned to her, I asked, did you hear what happened to Sam? She knows Sam, obviously, everybody knows Sam. And she said, yeah, he said something mean about, or something not nice about Koreans, about Asians. And apparently a lot of people have the perception that this scandal, the controversy, occurred because of what Sam Okyere said about Koreans or Asians in general. So the story seems to be completely misconstrued.
Right. A lot of it seems to be that the incident happened where he posted it first, and then people started digging into his past, which it wasn't like it was hidden, but it was, things that weren't an issue before. All of a sudden, you had people who were mad at him pulling them up, and one of them was the picture you're talking about, and his response to, once you go black, you never go back. I think it was preach or something, which, for those who don't speak English, it just means I agree, I guess, like the simplest of terms. And that is an indication. It's kind of got a sexual reference to it, which is kind of a problem in Korean culture, because there is an element of purity that kind of surrounds Korean female celebrities as well. At least the perception of purity, in a way. So that was one thing that somebody, I don't know who, screen captured, took it out and said, look at him being sexist, or at least talking about sexual things around this nice Korean, I think it was actress, right?
Right.
And I think that, and then the slanted eye picture that came up, a lot of that anger that came from it was, well, you're hypocritical, or you're not you're not perfect either, so why are you criticizing us? And I think that's how that particular picture gained traction, it seems like. Right.
Here. The picture you just mentioned, where Sam is showing the slanted eyes, I just brought that up too. I don't know what context this appeared into. It's really, I think, inappropriate to kind of judge a book by its cover, right? Like we see a picture, we don't know what transpired during this conversation or how this picture was taken, what the context was, and so just placating this one as a sign of him making fun of Asians is kind of, it's wrong, because again, I don't know what context this appeared in, right? He could have been making fun of his eyes, because technically when you look at his eyes, they're pretty thin themselves, right?
I don't want to say anything. I don't want to get canceled. Yeah. In the video clip, it's Spanish. They're talking about a Spanish festival on the show Abnormal Summit, and one of the contests is to make a funny face, and everyone was just making quick faces. He made that one. Nobody noticed at the time that it was. Well, I mean, it seems like he wasn't trying to make slanty eyes. And that is a very quick screen capture of his face.
Right.
Like, you're right, there's more context around it.
Right.
So, again, something that they went back in the past and they found this moment. And if you look at that picture, it looks like in just the picture with no context, what a racist, like that's what could pop up in your mind.
Sure. So the reason for why Sam tweeted, I've got the polar bears here, with their faces distorted. So we're not another point that a lot of netizens were making or being angry about it was, I guess, that he posted a picture of the students without actually covering their faces, and I think in one of his posts he apologized for that actually. And I agree with that. That probably would have been better. Hey, Sheila is in the chat. Hi, Sheila. Posting the students' pictures in that context probably would have been better served if he had hidden their faces. So that's kind of his fault on there. But, yeah. What are your thoughts on this whole idea? So, like you mentioned, the polar bears in Guyana, it's a company that does funerals and kind of... lifts the mood up a little bit, I guess. And these kids kind of copied it without allegedly realizing the meaning behind blackface, right? That's the whole what's excuse in South Korea, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I spent some time. This is not the first time this happened in Korea. So sorry. Let me just backtrack a little bit. So there was an issue with netizens, had an issue with him posting the pictures of the kids, the students. And then when he was apologizing, there was an issue with him using the words educating and ignorant. And yeah, so maybe, where do we go from here? I don't know. Okay, maybe go into the blackface. So it's, it's claimed ignorance, right? But I mean, the use of blackface in Korea is not a new thing. So it's not like these boys, were they high school students or?
Yeah, I believe it was their last year of high school, yes.
Right, okay. So it's not like this is the first time that ever happened to them. And I'm sure that, the topics of blackface use in South Korea, it didn't happen the first time. Like, I just scanned quickly through Google, and the pictures that came out are these, for example. Another issue was that Sam posted something about K-pop, right? And I watched the video by, DKD KTV News, who were saying that a lot of Koreans were complaining that this has nothing to do with K-pop, when right there a picture clearly shows that it does have a lot to do with K-pop. I think that there are pop stars who are involved in portraying themselves with black faces. So this isn't like an separated instance. It's not the first time. I actually also pulled up a blog somewhere that's titled, let's see here, what is it, like 3 decades of blackface in Korea.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so so this is not like a separated instance, not the first time. And from another article that I found, it's not the last. This is Busan.com exclusive. Even in, what is it? I assume it's Gyeongju. This is like a poor Google translation from Korean. Gyeongju old book, the black dress. I don't know. But basically, a couple of days after Sam made his sent out the message saying that it's inappropriate, and and then the netizens were defending the whole thing with the students couldn't possibly have known. And so while it was talked about, like 4 days later, another group of students posted the exact same thing. The pole bears with painted faces, basically, and they hashtagged Sam Okyere along. So that's kind of like saying, yeah, we know what you're saying, but fuck you.
Yeah, pretty much. That was a basic F you to Sam.
Yeah.
And everyone who was trying to say something about it.
Right. So I don't know, like how you personally feel about Korea, and I'm not gonna put you on the spot because you've kind of have a medium-sized limelight pointed at you. But me personally, I've been in Korea for about 15 years. You have for 11. So, to me, Korea is home. My family's here. My wife's here. My children are, half Canadian, half Korean.
Yeah. Freaking adorable. I was doing my homework, watching your videos, and you got such a cute family, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
It's making me be like, wait, why am I not married yet? What am I doing wrong? I got 4 more years. Is that it?
Yeah, you got time. We got married, like we got kids. We had kids late. 36, I think I was.
Okay, I got a few years left. Not much.
Yeah. And so somebody said the faces were unblurred. No, the first picture, the faces were smudged. These ones here are completely blurred. So no,
that's my friend Xander. He's just trolling me.
Okay. Yeah, no, the faces.
Shut up, Xander. I saw the blurring in there.
Yeah. Right.
So my opinion on Korea, as far as what part of it? Because it is home. It's definitely home.
Yeah.
At this point.
But do you think, are there things that you would say Korea could do better? And I'm this is not just Korea, because every country can do things better and should do things better. It just so happens that for me personally, like my reference to anything in life right now is Korea. So when I talk about, for example, teaching kids, my reference is always to teaching kids in Korea, teaching Korean kids, because I've got, maybe a year of very, very amateur experience of teaching in Canada. And so the majority of my time spent teaching has been in Korea. So any reference that I make, after a decade and a half of living in Korea is basically to Korea. So it may appear like I'm picking at Korea because I am not Korea. Because if I was a Korean dude and I was talking about Korea, it's always, okay, this Korean guy talking about Korea. But it's not. It's never perceived like that.
Yeah.
We're always expats who are non-Korean and talk about Korea, and whatever we say will be judged as positive or negative, right?
Yep, and that depends on whether or not our comments about Korea are positive or negative.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I know that's I'm sure maybe the three of us, you, me, and even Sam, have kind of the same perception of Korea. We love Korea. Because we live here, we see the faults with Korea. And we talk about it because these are things that we think could be fixed. But having said that, and I try to do this on my channel as much, maybe not as much recently because of this, but I talk about the things I love about Korea, because that's why I'm here. I'm not here in spite of these terrible things that Korea does. I'm here because the majority of things about Korea I love. And I've been told, why don't you go back home and fix your own country? Why don't you make fun of your own country? I'm like, watch my videos, man. I make fun of America all the time. America is my #1 enemy on my YouTube channel. And that's because I love America too, because I want it to get better. And I think that's the thing about Korea. It's a tough line to really walk there, because you want to stand up and you want to say, you asked for an example. I think one thing that could be fixed is the Good Samaritan law. There is technically a Good Samaritan law in Korea, but if you step into a fight to break it up and somebody gets hurt, and you hurt the guy that was beating somebody else, you can be fined. You can get caught. And I think that's an issue that I've criticized. At least I haven't made a video on it, but I criticize it around my friends. I'm like, it's just something that I wish Korea would change. because I've never. Well, that's not true. I my friend and I were a little bit drunk one time, and we saw two agencies fighting in the train, and one of them started bleeding, so we just pulled him back. We didn't do anything. We didn't punch him. We didn't nothing. Yeah. That's it. But I mean, I may have only done it because I had a few beers. If I had accidentally broken his nose, if I had actually made him fall, then he would have stood there and yelled at the police officers to yell at me to make me pay for his alleged hospital fees. That is a real possibility. It's happened to my friends. It's never happened to me.
Right.
And so there are things like that are not perfect. And as I say that, I feel like every time I'm on YouTube, even if I'm just on the podcast, I'm just like, I want to qualify that with America has a lot of terrible things going on. And I'm just pointing out one thing about Korea that I want to fix right now. Not like, I'm trying not to what's the word, like denigrate Korea. This is something that can be fixed. And that's all I want to say. I don't want to say I hate Korea. And in fact, I even say that in a lot of the videos is to all my non-Korean viewers out there, don't think this is all of Korea, especially Sam's incident. This is not all of Korea. Most Koreans aren't leaving us terrible comments under our YouTube videos. Most Koreans that are younger are open-minded. They're understanding. So as you hear me even like trying to like put disclaimers on every comment I'm making to you right now, that's sort of how I feel when I criticize Korea. It's like, I don't hate Korea. I really don't. I promise. I swear. I'm saying. But
yeah, you always kind of have to tiptoe around any kind of negative issue about Korea because it's always going to be misconstrued and it's going to be put into the framework of here's another expat criticizing Korea. Why don't you go back home, right?
Why don't you go back home? Yeah.
I mean, go back home if you don't like it.
I gotta say, it's funny because I think we get some of those comments from like Korean Americans who have been in America for longer than I've been in Korea, or I've been here more than you've been in Korea, and yet, it's like you don't understand our culture. I'm like, I know a little bit.
Right.
Give me some credit.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a way to escape. Sheila's here in the comments. She says the longer we stay in Korea, the more we talk about it. Absolutely, it's kind of unavoidable. Like it doesn't matter where you are. Remember, I lived in Germany for a while before moving back to Canada, and after moving back, like my friends were annoyed at the fact that I kept talking about Germany. It's like I spent a pretty good chunk of my life in Germany, so when I came back to Canada, I was just like, that's all I knew. And just so that's if I went back to Canada, I'd be talking about Korea all the time. I'd be talking about the good and all the bad. I'd probably be comparing all the good stuff that Korea has to all the bad stuff in Canada, and people would be getting annoyed with me for saying, how great. People would be walking around like, ooh, look at Jack. He thinks Korea is the freaking cat's pajamas, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure it's the same for you. Like,
oh yeah. I do when I go back. I mean, that's why they must be happy that I'm only going back for a week at a time. Because all I do is talk about Korea. It's cool for the first 4 days. And then like, all right, dude, we just want to talk about the new Dunkin' Donuts that opened down the street. Stop talking about how great Korea is.
Exactly.
There's a good comment that just came in. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, was it? So Sheila just said, that's why people leave fighting alone. Exactly.
Yeah, that's
kind of
true.
similar to Russia, to China. And then the King Gliwe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it says, hi Alex, I'm a Korean American living here in Korea for 5 years. No clue for Koreans regarding the history of blackface in America. The movie Birth of a Nation, 1915, Al Johnson. I assume it's Johnson. And Andy and Amos.
Yeah. The comment is I mean, it's just very accurate. I can't tell like what his position is based on it, but that brings up a really good point to the discussion we're having about this racism, blackface. I think a lot of the problem that people had is that when he heard Sam say that, to kind of like bring it full circle, they all thought it was just this absolute criticism of Korea. Korea's terrible and all this. And I don't think once Sam criticized the kids for not knowing about the history of blackface in America, for not knowing about Birth of a Nation. And there's a lot of truth in that statement. Like, Koreans don't know. And it is on me as an American, to be honest, and other Americans here to explain that to people. So I don't think even me or Sam or you or anyone talking about it is even trying to be like, you should have known about the entire history of blackface. And I think we scared away a lot of Koreans who thought that we were just like wagging our fingers at them, like you don't know better. And the only thing that I was wagging my finger about is, hey, you're kind of just ignoring the conversation we're supposed to have. That's what I was mad about. I wasn't even mad about Koreans not knowing necessarily, because I think that's part of every time this comes up. We more Koreans find out about it, more Koreans learn about it, and that's the positive. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Like, I can't sit here and be mad at Koreans 100% because they don't know about Birth of a Nation. That's as an American white person, that's my history, and that's what we did. And Koreans weren't around, and blackface is only a problem. I don't know about Canadians' history with blackface, to be honest, but blackface exists because white Americans did it to make black people look stupid in their place. That's basically blackface. Technically came from, I think it was Othello. It came from European theater, but it wasn't used negatively. It was just used because, well, they didn't use black actors, I guess. But then in America, it took on the negative connotations.
Yeah, I think the Dutch still to this day use black faces for certain occasions, holidays, or whatever. And I don't know the background, but yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, the King Leeway. I wanted to have a good conversation with people, and it just doesn't seem possible with the amount of hostility on the internet. Again, a small percentage of Koreans, like, there's probably a big percentage that didn't know about it, but only a small percentage were as evil as some of these people are. These comments are really evil, especially at Sam.
I didn't read any of the comments, to be honest with you. I didn't read any of the comments that came in towards Sam. But I can just imagine what. Maybe I can't. Yeah. No, I can't imagine.
I mean, yeah. Well, you can, because I'll just say, like, I won't say the words, but just like, especially for Americans, they have a lot of. Well, for me, they used a lot of American slang, but the easy ones are like Yankee Gnome or whatever. But like, they would use the words that drunk addressees use when they're on the streets yelling at somebody else. And but they would use it about Sam, they would use it about me, they would use it about anyone talking about it. Right. And it's funny because, like, they would be like, you're so uneducated, you're so ignorant, and yet, wait, I thought you hated that word because it. Right. Wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good point you bring it up, because that's kind of what I want to talk about as well. There was the point that was being brought up was a lot of people had an issue with Sam having written the apology not the apology, the initial post in two languages, in Korean and in English. And it said that the Korean one was a lot more politely worded, and while the English one used the words educated, like people need to be educated and stop being so ignorant type deal. Two videos I watched. One was with Cedric and the Half Project. Becky is her name?
Yeah.
The Halfy Project. Yeah, they made a video, and I was listening to that. And a point they brought up was, of course, it escapes my mind now because my mind is racing each and every way. But people were saying that.
I think I saw that video. I think could the point have been like, was it in defense of Sam? Because I think one of the points that was made was that it's ridiculous to think he was trying to hide his English from Koreans, because we all know that a lot of Koreans can speak English. Like, it's not like he was trying to slip one by Koreans and maybe they won't know that I said this in English. It was kind of like, it's like it was written a different way, because we've also learned as foreigners that you have to speak differently to Koreans, right? Because of the culture of language and when to use certain formal speech and kind of how to word things, and you go more roundabout because that's Korean culture. English is much more direct.
Exactly.
And I think that was something that was a
that's the point precisely. They were saying that Becky was saying that the different levels of politeness are embedded in the Korean society, in the language, in the culture. Whereas English doesn't really have that. It's very like there are levels of politeness, but they're a little bit less direct. English itself is very direct, but you add ka imni ka in Korean, and it's very clear what you're saying. Whereas in English, like a question like "Can you pass me the salt?" does not appear polite, but it is. It's a polite version, like a soft, polite version of asking, "Give me the salt," right?
Yeah.
So people are complaining that he wrote two different versions of the initial statement in Korean and in English, and they were saying that, they were asking, why didn't you use the same wording in Korean as you did in English? Do you think we can't read? And then people went on and completely misunderstood or misconstrued the meaning of education, because the way that education is used in English, I need to educate you. It has a lot heavier kind of connotation, a lot heavier meaning in Korean from what I've seen other Koreans talk about. So yeah, it's precisely the reason why he probably couldn't use the same wording in the Korean version, as he did in English, because the meaning doesn't fit. He couldn't use the same wording. And so people who complained that they did understand, people who complained that Sam assumed that they couldn't understand English, they actually couldn't in that particular case, because they misunderstood the meaning of, or over exaggerated the meaning of educate and ignorance.
Yeah.
So that's kind of issue that I.
Well, we can segue. I'll keep it on the same topic, but it's related to what the King Lee Wei said again, which was the attack on Bella. I don't know her last name. Porch, a Filipino American TikTok artist with a tattoo of the rising sun in her arm, and that's how Cancel Korea became trending. #Cancel Korea. So a lot of these people that are commenting under my videos, or about Sam, or that will comment under your videos once you make this commentable, a lot of them are kind of the conservative, maybe older generation Korean people, and they were mad that he used the word educated and uneducated, whatever. The current thing with the Cancel Korea thing is that Koreans got super mad at this Filipino American who had a tattoo of the rising sun flag on her arm with a heart in the middle of it. And she apologized right away, said, "I want to get rid of it. I didn't know what it meant when I got it." And then the Korean comments, again, from a small portion of Koreans, were like, "How can you be so uneducated? How can you be so ignorant?" I'm like, wait a second. Wait a second. No, you can't, because one of the big things they would say under the comment section was like, hey, Sam is a hypocrite, and the only thing we hate in Korea is hypocrites. Right. I'm like, that is the most hypocrite. What just happened?
And I come across this on a regular basis, and again, I don't want to point fingers at Koreans, because I'm sure people across the world do it, but I encounter this on a regular basis here. It's kind of double standard of people saying, "Oh, you can't say bad things about Korea, but it's okay if we say bad things about other nations." It's so bizarre to me.
I mean, I get it. I've been forced to reflect upon kind of the culture of America too, so it's bizarre. But then I think back to some of the terrible things that certain Americans who are uneducated and ignorant say to Asians. And they will say things that go back to your own country, and go, "We speak English here," and quit speaking Chinese to random people who aren't Chinese. And it has forced me to really face my ignorance on how pervasive that was back in America. It's big. It's more now. Well, that's not. It's more in the open now, than it was. So I do feel a little bit for the Koreans who are angry, because they've been dealing with that crap in America, especially Korean Americans. They've been dealing with this crap forever. And so I can't just sit here and be like, Koreans are bad because they said these things to Sam, and not understand why those Korean Americans they are definitely angry, and they have a reason to be angry. And then they see this happening and this fight going. It's all interconnected in a way. And I get it too, by the way. The whole Alex is a foreigner in Korea. What's his right to say that? because the people who have been mean to Korean Americans in America are often white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to hear me criticizing Korea for being racist to Sam is like, nope, no, hold up a second, hold up a second. So I do kind of feel bad, or not bad, I guess. I feel maybe like more forgiving or understanding of why a lot of this anger has come up,
Yeah.
especially from the Korean American community. So I'm trying to like kind of recalibrate myself too, to be like, okay, some of these people are angry, but maybe there's a reason for it.
Bob Mokja and Happy says, how about just racists are bad regardless of race, nationality? Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, yeah, technically that's definitely true. Yeah.
You get good and bad everywhere, right? And
Yeah.
we're not saying that Korea as a whole is like that. I'm sure there's plenty of Koreans who look at the situation and say, like, Sam has been mistreated. But those are probably the people who do not say anything on the media. The ones who are like shouting the loudest are probably the ones that are, either the most racist or most
angry.
About
Also,
something else.
They don't face any consequences. I think that's one of the reasons it was so quiet in the public celebrity sphere, is that, this was pointed out by one of my other YouTuber friends, Mike Cole. He was doing a live stream on this one, and he said, like, all these celebrities were doing like hashtag Black Lives Matters a few months ago, and then when Sam gets beaten down with this thing, everyone was quiet. Nobody spoke up.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember saying BTS, Black Lives Matter this, Black Lives Matter there, so all the K-pop. And now when Sam kind of tweeted, K-pop attaching it, maybe in hope of like some K-pop stars backing him up, all of a sudden everybody twists the other way around saying, hey, K-pop's got nothing to do with that, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
That was really interesting, and I feel torn because I get to say that. I get to sit here and be like, why did they say anything? But I'm not big enough of a celebrity to. I'm not at the cancel level yet.
That's exactly it. On one of my groups, on the Living group, Living Korea page, I posted a thought that I had, and this was like when Sam came along, or the issue of Sam happened here. The issue of Sam. Sam's dilemma. I posted something along the lines, this is how celebrities are taken off the air or destroyed. And it seems to me like in Korea, there's the proverb, right? The nail that sticks out needs to be hammered down, right? And I think Sam is the most recent case, but in the past, I mean, there were Korean celebrities as well, or mainly. I think this is the second one now, right? First one was the longest existing expat with a Korean citizenship.
Oh, on TV, you mean Robert Hawley?
Yeah, Robert Hawley, right?
Yeah.
His demise happened for whatever reason. Prior to that, there was a singer and actress, a young girl, 20-something years old, who spoke up against K-pop. Basically, she made a stand saying how abusive the K-pop industry is, and just it's not a nice place. That was her stand, and that's what she was voicing out on the media. Yeah. And a little while later, she was dead. Suicide.
Yeah.
And I guess you could spin a conspiracy theory around it, but it seems like anytime somebody speaks up against the status quo here, they basically get silenced in one way or another. And I get a feeling that this is exactly what happened to Sam. Some kids made a thing. It's a popular thing in Korea that they apparently do every year, and then Sam stood up and said, "Hey, that's not okay." And some people said, no, that we're not going to put up with that and get rid of this dude. And here we go.
Yeah, it's a strong. I never understood how strong the netizen community was, and like you said, like people have killed themselves in the K-pop community, especially when the netizens get very strong and get mad at them, and that deals with issues of depression. Because I'm lucky I don't have depression, because I was reading the comments that I was getting, and I was like, "Oh, no, this is terrible." And I have gotten 1/1000th the amount of comments that K-pop celebrity has gotten, and
Right.
probably less evil. And I don't suffer from depression or being overworked in the K-pop industry. I can deal with it,
Right.
but I get how powerful these, I don't know, what do you call them in Korea? In America, we call them like basement trolls. They live with their parents in the basement, but I don't know what you call them in Korea. It's internet trolls,
Yeah, I think
and
I
they're
thought,
strong,
yeah, wherever they come from.
and they don't let up. I had the same guy like commenting, like I think he's on comment number 9 or 10 on one of my videos, and he just keeps like goading me to try and bring me out. Like, oh, so like Sam's your boy now? You think he's okay because he's your boy? I'm like, I haven't responded yet because I think that's what makes him angry when you don't respond.
Yeah.
But he got bored, and then now he's doing it on Mike Cole's video. Just moved over to someone else and just started.
Just people miserable with themselves. Like I think I've got one or two. One individual kept showing up and bashing the podcast. It was like, oh, one time there was something wrong with my audio. It didn't appear for 20 minutes, and he was just like, he was so happy. He was wallowing in happiness, saying, "Serves you right. This is a shitty podcast." And then another time was like, "Oh, I thought you were a professional content creator," and it caught me off guard. I was like, "Oh." And then I thought, wait a minute, what the heck is a professional content creator?
I thought you were Joe Rogan, bro.
Yeah. But I mean, these are minor instances. But yeah, like you say, if you're a celebrity and you're in the in the limelight, like on a constant basis, and then I assume you'd be bombarded with negativity, and there's nobody who like steps up and says, hey, because I mean, for the longest time, Sam was loved, right? Like everybody loved Sam, this and that, and now all of a sudden, there's people just like shitting all over him, and I bet he probably felt super let down by all the people he thought were his friends or whatever, or working with him in the industry, the people who never said anything, to stand up. There is a question here that has been hidden for a reason, I guess. Let me just read it first. Right. Okay. It's a. I don't know why YouTube muted this. Here it says. Let me ask you guys a simple question. How does one of the most successful people in a foreign country become a victim?
Oh, I see what that question's asking. Because it's okay. So if you ask that question, you're in a position that's lower than Sam. We're all lower than Sam in this. Probably anyone in this chat room. Like Sam was at pretty near peak for foreigner celebrity status, and so the idea is like, well, he got so much from Korea and he made so much money out of it. Why is he a victim? I'm like, well, because it's still not fair. Yeah. Like I don't want bad things to happen to people more successful than me, but a lot of people do get kind of that, like when someone they don't like is a celebrity and they fall down, we enjoy that, like psychologically. And so I get why he's asking the question. I don't think you can still be a victim. You can still be a celebrity, have billions of dollars, and become a victim. I get where that, I guess, if I don't know if he's asking out of anger or not, but I get how some people who would ask out of anger would be like, he already got so much in life. Why are you defending him? But I still think, he deserved it more than I did. He learned Korean better than I did. Yeah. And, he's better looking. He's in shape. He's a good representative of his country. He was there first. Like, there's so many reasons that I can't.
And it didn't drop in his lap just, overnight, right? Like, he worked at it. So it's not like it was just handed over to him. So I think, anybody who works their butt off to get where they are and they reach a certain level of, status, acquisition or whatever, I think they're entitled to kind of own that and say, yeah, I've done that. So when they get kicked down from there, I think it's also fair for them to say, I didn't deserve it because I worked hard for it. And what Sam did, like, to stand up and with that. I don't think that anybody should have the right to say, hey, you have no place saying that, particularly when it's coming, a black man, like in this case, a black man talking about something that refers or is relevant and related to black people in general, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a more mature that a lot of the Korean netizens could have taken or should have taken was to say, well, we get where you're coming from, but this is what we think, rather than saying, hey, get lost, get out of here, and just behaving like basically, angered high school kids.
Some of them might be, who are honestly.
Yeah, possibly.
I've heard that a lot of these netizens are actually like middle school or elementary school kids who listen to their parents and just don't know the consequences of what they do online, and they just post stuff. So it could very well be school kids.
Right. Here's another comment from Drew Hong. His comments keep getting blocked. I'm asking because in the USA, where I currently reside, LeBron James considers himself a victim. That I have no idea about. So
that depends on. I mean, this is a super deep conversation. That depends on in what ways. Like, I think a black person in the U.S. can be a victim of plenty of things, even if he's rich. But he can still have a better life than a white person or an Asian person in America. So, like, would I trade my life to be LeBron James? I mean, I love my life, but like, it wouldn't be bad to be LeBron James either. But, I think people who are more successful or living better lives can still be victims. And LeBron James is another example of someone who worked his butt off to get where he is. So he kind of earned it. So I don't think Sam is a racist or a victim. This is Drew again. But I think because of his race, he felt he had to be pro-black. I can't speak on behalf of the black community, but yeah.
Possibly.
Like, the black community is overall, and I'm not saying it's Korea, it's definitely America, but it's like overall black people have a lower place in society in many countries. So there is a need for the black community to band together. It's like a survival thing. And so I don't blame them at all if he felt the need to do it because he's got to stand with his black brethren.
Yeah, but all races do that. All except for the white races, I think. Like, I've lived in my hometown Winnipeg in Canada. There is a massive Filipino community, and Filipinos stick together. They they live near each other. There is a whole neighborhood just full of Filipinos living because it's comfortable for them. So I don't think it's just the black community that kind of sticks together or backs each other up. I think this happens all across the races, or whatever you want to label it as, that, right?
Any group of people that feel like they are being oppressed or insulted, they usually band together to fight a common enemy, whether it's racism or whether it's an insult, whatever, will band people together. And even in America, there is a group of white people who think that their rights are being violated. So even they're grouping together now, and there's a political movement around that. So everyone is subject to that kind of it's not herd mentality. It's community, like whatever it was in evolutionary terms that you had to survive by sticking together with your family unit, with your community unit. And I don't blame him. I believe Sam believes what he said. It's not just because he's black. But even if that were the case, I wouldn't be like, he's just doing it because he's black. Like it's probably not that simple.
Yeah. One question I had on kind of is Sam an American citizen, or is he Guyanese? Like, what's
Ghana? Yeah, Guyanese. Yeah. He's from there. He goes back there often. I never talked to him about this because I'm not that close to him, but I believe he has a dream of one day going back to Ghana to be in like the political field or some kind of field that is able to work with Korea and like go back and forth and help bridge the countries together. Yeah, is one of his things. So he is from Ghana. Well, at least his citizenship is. I assume he was born there, but I could be wrong.
Right. One more comment from Drew Hong before I. Yeah. Okay. See. I need to get some sleep, man. I've got thoughts that run through. I listen to you and I forget immediately what I was going to say. Here's a comment from Drew. In America, there is actually a huge backlash against BLM by responsible black Americans who are sick of the violence and rioting, but it's never shown on the media. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
podcast that I was tuning in for a while, run by a black fella, an older gentleman who is very much anti the BLM movement and the whole idea of blacks being discriminated against in the States. Personally, there's nothing I can say about it. I listen to him and I kind of say, that is interesting, but there's no opinion that I can have either way. So. Yeah, I know what you're saying there, Drew. But personally,
Yeah.
I don't. I've got
It
no.
it doesn't seem to be a huge backlash. I
Mm,
think that community of black people does exist,
hmm
but I would still say like I can't give a number because I would just be making it up. But
Yeah.
it's the higher percentage of black people would still be in favor of Black Lives Matter. And yes, there are some people who disagree with that.
Mm. At times, Korea is an unforgiving culture. Young Jun Il in 1990, Agyopo had a hit song, Rebecca, because he used English. He took a lot of flack. It took him 30 years for him to be accepted by Korea again.
Dang,
Really? Now every
dang.
single song has English in it, man. Oh,
He
almost
was
every.
ahead of the times, man. He was ahead of the times. That's
Yeah.
interesting because yeah, the last big hit songs were like 100% English and like 90% English with Blackpink's
Mm,
Ice Cream. That was like 95% English.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe some started something that's gonna take hold and eventually change Korean society. Because I personally think Koreans. I agree. Like on that point, I agree with Sam. Korean education does need to be um, strengthened in the sense, and I forget the quote or the paragraph. I'm not going to paraphrase it or paraphrase. I will paraphrase it. Um, Something along like from my experience working with Korean students. In general, Koreans don't have a lot of understanding of the world outside of Korea. So when Sam was saying that you need to be educated and ignorance has to stop, I think he's coming from a point which is very reserved in how he was expressing it. I think even in English, he wasn't saying how he felt because I've heard from Koreans how they feel about black people in Korea. I mean, Koreans shit on Chinese all the time. The number of times I heard Koreans say how dirty Chinese are, how Chinese are this, how Chinese are that, and how darker skin is regarded as dirty and this. And this is coming from children. Like I work with children on a regular basis and I hear that. Not so much anymore, but I'm sure Sam, over his lifetime in Korea, he's heard plenty of this stuff. So I think when he says, this ignorance needs to stop, it's coming from a place of very valid experience, and I think he's muting down or toning down how he really feels.
Oh yeah.
Personally, that's my personal experience. I'm sure you and I, you've been here for long enough. I've experienced the milder form of racism, right? Like people pointing to you and just whether you are American or not, kids would say, "Oh, migokin," right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, there's also something I call positive racism. I don't know if it's a legit thing or not, but
I get you.
you
I
know,
know that. Yeah.
you get into a restaurant and like you get freebies because you're an expat or you're white,
Yeah.
or you're not Korean.
Or, I mean, I'm not saying you ever did this because this would be illegal, but
Mm,
you could possibly be offered more money for private tutoring than
right.
just because you're white.
Yeah. So, and again, it's good or bad, but it is a form of like mild racism. So, to this day, when I see like kids approach my children who are half Korean, half white, and they say, "Oh, migo or wigugin." So there is that level of ignorance that's embedded in the education system because the education system is basically not teaching Korean kids how to behave around foreigners, around expats.
True.
So I don't know. On that level, I do agree with that comment. Lucky for me, I am not on television. My show will not get canceled. I might get some trolls coming in and dropping some nasty comments, but
Yeah.
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 Uh,
That's a good point. To give credit to Korea where credit is due, especially in societies that have been America has been dealing with for a long time. America is much slower to change, I feel like, and I think Korea in the last 10 years itself has done an incredible amount of social change. Their awareness of foreigners existing in the community, how they treat white people, how they treat black people. It is still far from perfect, especially probably towards black people, but and towards Chinese and maybe some Southeast Asian countries. But it has gotten a lot better in a short period of time compared to the time it takes social change to happen in, let's say, the United States. So there are good things about it that I see, and I think the young generation, even stepping up and defending Sam under our comments, or under the comments section in our videos, shows that this Korea is a much different Korea than it was 10 years ago, than probably 15 years ago when you first came, than 30 years ago when Jong Il, the English singer, did his thing. So that is one thing that if there's a positive takeaway from this. I think Korea is changing, even though you do get this like resistance every so often.
Right.
So that's kind of nice, and I gotta give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know we've hit the 1 hour mark. We usually run this podcast for about an hour plus or minus. Otherwise, I noticed that the attention span of the community just drops off drastically. I've been told time and time again that an hour is just too long.
An hour sounds good to me.
Yeah. The King Leeway says, by the way, guys, I have a channel and did a live stream about blackface about 2 weeks ago. Thanks for the stream and enjoyed talking about these issues here with you guys. No problemo.
Love your comments. It was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Drew also says, if racism is so oppressive, how do Asians outperform other races in America? Asians are the most attacked and abused by all races. I'd rather not get into the whole race.
That is a whole nother 2 hour long video.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just stick to like Sam, Okyere, and Korea for now.
That is a video that deserves attention. So absolutely. I will give you that for bringing that up.
Yeah,
but for another time.
I'm not dismissing it, and I'm pretty sure Alex is not dismissing it. But yeah, like Alex said, man, it's a longer conversation we should have, or somebody should have, at a different time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess my last thought, like, when it comes to Sam Okyere, I've seen other celebrities, Korean celebrities, not the ones whose career has been washed off and, either killed themselves or whatever, but there were a couple of guys in the past. There's a big wrestler dude who didn't pay his taxes. He was very big was on every single station here in Korea.
Yep.
And he didn't pay his taxes, and he just, got canceled everywhere. He continued to do his thing. I saw his restaurants popping up left and right here and there. And Drew says, subbed. Would love to continue the chat next time. Thanks, Drew. Everybody else who's here, remember to, if you don't sub, at least hit the like button on the video. That'd be greatly appreciated. So these celebrities, they disappeared, but they did make a comeback. Maybe not as ferociously, not as fast and with as much impact as they did in the past, but they were able to recover in some level or another. So I hope that this will happen for Sam as well. And who knows, maybe, he will change some of aspects of Korea for the better. And, hopefully his career is going to turn back around and he'll make a comeback at some level.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right on the money there. I think he'll be back. He will do what many Korean celebrities have done in the past and go under the radar for a while, come back, and that conversation about blackface will probably happen when he comes back, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty, I think good closing. Hey, Alex.
Yes.
Because I was going to ask you some other stuff. Maybe just a closing to close it all up. Where do you see yourself going with your career, with your, TV or your YouTube and everything else that you do here? Where do you see yourself going forward? And I don't want to say 5-10 years from now, but
Yeah, yeah. I'll be here for a while as long as I'm not canceled. I think my natural progression at my current state is to move into a full-time hosting job. I had one, but it was kind of a little bit different. But as a radio person, the next level is to be kind of like an established host. And I hope that's the next step for me. I'm going to be doing a podcast actually, because I think having a podcast is what gives you that credibility to be able to talk, to be able to host other people. And that's my next step. My overall goal, though, is I think it would be great to make a career out of having these kind of discussions, but also having lighthearted discussions about travel and culture on Korean television. That's another longer term goal, but also on English radio. And I just like what I do. I really enjoy it, and I hope that I can make a career out of it and raise a family on that income, and maybe make a little more money too. I mean, I wouldn't be against becoming a super celebrity and like super rich. I'm not against that at all. But I would like to do that kind of lifestyle of supporting myself, doing what we're doing now, both on YouTube, but also in, the radio and TV world.
Yeah, I hear you. I second that. That would be a kind of dream come true, so to speak. One last shout out to Kongnamul Deji Sa Hyungjae Kongnamul. That's one of my 안녕. One of my kid's friend.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, Alex, thanks a lot for coming on. Thanks for agreeing to do this podcast. This was a very good talk, I think. I think our listeners will agree. Good conversation. Thank you, Drew, for coming down and communicating. I have no idea what you've done, Drew, in the past. I don't know why your comments were muted, but I think you brought up some good ideas, good questions, and to the table. So thanks.
Yeah,
thanks for that.
Love the fact that they're bringing the conversation points that we disagree with, but it's nice to get even like respectful comments from disagreement. I love it. And so thank you for joining us.
Yeah. And all right. So Alex, have a good one. I'm going to say goodbye and conclude the program.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Jack. It was
Likewise. Fun. Take care. Let's do it again sometime.
I guess I'm free on Mondays at 10. So
fantastic.
I'll let you know when I do my podcast and get that up and running.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Alrighty, and right. So, concluding remarks. Yeah, Drew, you have to remember all the violence Koreans have suffered from the black community, like the LA riots. So it's hard for Koreans to have solidarity with a community that has a history of violence towards them. Yeah, it's true. But I mean, the same thing could be said about Koreans and the Vietnamese. Koreans were sent to Vietnam during the Vietnam-US war, right? And the Korean military did some nasty stuff from what I heard. I didn't read a lot about it, but the things that I heard, and even Koreans, I heard Koreans talk about it, they kind of, put their heads down and admit that the things that Koreans did in Vietnam were not very nice. But yet, Vietnam seems to have forgiven Korea to some extent or another, and things are moving forward, so to speak, I guess. A lot of Korean companies moved in and into Vietnam, and a lot of Vietnamese come down to South Korea to learn the language so they can work in companies and yada yada yada. So I guess it's all about forgiveness and not necessarily forgetting, but just forgetting and understanding each other, right? I think you would agree with that, Drew. Sheila is the person to talk to. Black woman in South Korea, and I'm sure she could share some interesting stories, maybe in the comment section below, because I would like to close up this podcast an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you again, Sheila, for stopping by. Thank you for communicating. The King Leeway, thanks for coming. Drew Hong, thank you. Paul Surret, netizens. I did see that. I saw it, I didn't comment. Thank you for coming. Pop Mokja and Happy, thanks for showing up. Who else was here? That's it. JY Choi family, thank you for coming and participating in the podcast. If you are in the mood to subscribe, do so. Remember to come back next week for another podcast. I have no idea what it's going to be about. It's always a surprise. It might just be me yippity yapping. Hopefully there'll be another guest to talk with. And also come back for another upload that's going to occur sometime, either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday of a vlogish type of video from the Living Korea channel about Korea. Until then, have a good one, everybody. Stay cool, stay strong. Enjoy your last week. I'll see you next Monday, right before Chuseok, the Chuseok holiday. Doodles, 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 beloodles. Bye bye. Have a good night.